So, I recorded most of this video on the day of the Marvel Rivals Season 2 announcement trailer. So through most of this video, I talk about the Season 1.5 versions of the Vanguard characters. I will, however, give Emma Frost her own dedicated segments where necessary, add some corrections, and at the end of the video talk about every change to Vanguards and my opinion on them. I apologize for the inconvenience, but please bear with me. Disclaimer: I use Vanguard and Tank, Duelist and DPS, and Strategist and Support interchangeably in this video. To avoid confusion, I am referring to the same roles with these terms and not clarifying them as something else, unlike the idea of a support versus a healer, which is another story entirely. Marvel Rivals, the hero shooter breathing new life into the genre, taking the world by storm and creating a variety of gameplay experiences that appeal to all kinds of people. We all know it, and I take it if you're watching this video, you love it. But while anyone can jump into the casual side of things, it can feel overwhelming and difficult to understand the nuances in competitive, and I've seen too many posts talking about being hard stuck or blaming their teammates for everything. These posts are even more prominent when talking about the most misunderstood role in hero shooters, the tank, or in this case Vanguard. I myself am a former support turned tank main, with plenty of hours on every tank in Marvel Rivals and some background in Overwatch tank.
How did you become so miserable?
What do you think? Overwatch.
So I hope to give tips and tricks to help the experience for my fellow tank enthusiasts. You might be thinking that the role differentiations are not complicated. After all, strategists or supports heal, duelists or DPS do damage, and tanks or vanguards take damage in place of their squishies, which are the low HP characters, and shield them whenever possible. And while you might be correct, that is a bit of an oversimplification. Since while tanks are designed to soak up damage and often protect their teammates, they also have a lot more to think about, such as using this protection either instead of or in tandem with their often good damage output, using their large amounts of HP to take control of key points and high ground, and or win 1v1s. Make area space and give your team more room to breathe and more movement options to handle engagements. And most importantly, control the flow of any fight. It is very common for the tank, or the tanks, to initiate the team fight as either the first wall for the enemies to take down, or the distraction to draw their fire as the rest of the team starts an assault. But these are two completely different strategies, which leads me to my next topic, Vanguard subclasses. Now, you may have heard people make the distinction between a main tank and an off tank, usually by the request of someone who is in stock DPS and expects everyone to pick based around them. These terms will be familiar to Overwatch players, but in case you haven't heard them before, a main tank is usually a tank that focuses on support and protection of the entire team. They're at the front lines face tanking and being absolute units, while an off tank can focus on something else, whether that be damage output, flanks, or just supporting the team whenever they can. This distinction was more obvious in Overwatch, but it's a little more nuanced in the Rivals discussions. I think the design of tanks overall is avoiding some of the criticisms people had with Overwatch, such as double shield being very prevalent and unfun to play against, and later that tank vs tank was very painful to play with slow time to kill. Rivals is a much faster paced game, where every character can do significant damage. The healing output is higher, and the shields are nowhere near as beefy. For comparison, Doctor Strange is the highest health shield in the game at 800 HP, which isn't saying much as there's only 3 shields and 2 with health bars, but Reinhardt's shield is just under double that, at 1500 HP. Personally, I would say that Marvel Rivals only has 3 main tanks, which I find quite interesting, as it spices up tank gameplay a lot when there's many with different roles to play. These 3 tanks are Doctor Strange, Magneto, and Groot. But what if there was a secret 4th main tank? Hey, Vsauce, Michael here, and I disagree with what CO just said, because he clearly didn't realize that inputting the Konami code and pressing Alt F4 unlocks the newest tank in Marvel Rivals, Emma Frost, who yes, is another main tank. Honestly, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. Some people may disagree with me and consider Magneto or Groot to be an off-tank, which is a fine opinion to have since, like I said, it's a lot more nuanced. But Doctor Strange's shield, Groot's wars, and Magneto's shield, and bubbles, are all the most direct examples we have in the game of teammate protection. Strange's shield is pretty much his one and only way to protect his teammates, unless you count using his bigger frame, but that's not as important. His shield, however, is a great tool that makes up for this on its own. Other than that, Strange has levitation for exiting bad situations, creating distance between himself and melee threats like Wolverine, and blocking flying threats like an ulting Hela or Human Torch. Magneto is a character some people consider to be an off-tank, but I believe his shield and bubbles are excellent parts of his kit that help with protection too much for him not to be a main tank. His shield does have a small duration, however, so the timing is very important to learn, as using it in a panic can have dire consequences. But his bubbles are very useful for saving a squishy in a pinch, or assisting a dive DPS or tank in doing damage without receiving any. Groot's walls can not only be used as shields for your own backline to take damage in their stead, but also leave safe lines of sight open for them to continue healing you and your DPS. This limits the options for the enemies as they have to decide between shooting down your walls, taking the fire away from you and your team, or dealing with them and trying to power through you as they continue to give you more max HP and deal damage to nearby enemies. This also creates less movement options for the enemies and assists in making more space for your team by pushing them backwards. Emma Frost is similar to Strange in how she protects her allies, namely being that she doesn't have much apart from her shield, which is very similar to Sigma from Overwatch. It has 500 HP and can be projected forward, meaning she can use it in front of herself or at range to protect a teammate from afar or who is in the air or on high ground. This is the easiest way to absorb damage for your teammates and allow yourself to close distance to start dealing more damage and absorb all kinds of hits with your thunder thighs. Seriously, they could cut diamonds. This leaves Cap, Thor, Venom, Penny, The Thing, and Hulk as the off tanks. This makes sense as their abilities are more designed for the protection of themselves or for the output of damage. Usually. There's one outlier I can think of, but we'll get to that later. So, now that we've defined main and off tanks, surely we can understand the role of tanks better now, right? Well, there's one more set of classifications between off tanks. You might have noticed when going through the characters yourselves that tanks like The Thing play completely different to, say, Venom. And this is because, despite both being off tanks, they do serve different purposes. Off tanks can usually be defined in two categories, brawl tanks and dive tanks. For those wondering, I do not feel comfortable considering any tanks in Marvel Rivals poke tanks. I feel like the larger focus on melee tanks and more defined roles allow for most tanks to be able to poke, but don't create team comps around poking, which is a strategy involving attacking the enemy team from a distance to waste their cooldowns before you begin a proper assault. Anyway, a brawl tank would be a tank that usually engages in the midst of teamfights. They don't particularly have to be frontlining, but they're getting their damage out there and disrupting the enemy team from the front. I would define the brawl tanks of Marvel Rivals as The Thing and Thor. Thor's damage is often delivered with his main M1 combo and mixing in M2 hammer throws and shift dashes to displace enemies and push them back. Although he does have a ranged option in his Awakening Rune, but this is not generally recommended to use during brawls, as it works better to finish off enemies at range and 1v1 squishies. The Thing is the definition of a brawl tank. He has a chunky health bar and gains shields with his team up with Invisible Woman, and when using his shift charge ability, closes the distance, deals damage, and can displace several enemies at once. His M2 Haymaker can, and will, hit multiple enemies, and he thrives in the midst of a chaotic team fight. On the flip side of this, we have dive tanks. These tanks are more oriented towards flanking and movement-based assaults. You can make the argument that several tanks that have already been listed can also work in dive compositions, or just generally dive opponents, but I think it's easier to understand dive heroes as characters who don't need to wait for an opportunity to dive. They are the opportunity. They are built to do it. As long as they aren't running into 1v6, and partaking in an actual teamfight. The most effective playstyle is to disrupt and engage by ignoring the front line and using the mobility to engage the backline. The most prominent two we have are Captain America, who has an easily accessible power jump ability, allowing him to gain high ground and better vantage points to relentlessly pummel the enemy supports with the impact of a wet noodle. Cap has two cooldowns based around his movement. His F shield bash, which also makes him immune to CC, temporarily, fun fact, and his shield slam when you tap M1 while in the air. And Venom, who technically has three, his swing, his slam, and his passive to crawl and run on walls. This allows him to position himself in places that give him a dive opportunity, then slam into the enemy and start to harass the backline before swinging out. You might argue that these two tanks can also brawl, but that isn't a great use of their abilities, as their damage output will be much less impactful when pumped into the front line compared to sandwiching the enemies from behind. This also splits their damage output between both sides, and takes a lot of pressure off of any squishies pushing frontline with the tank. Despite these clear archetypes, there are at least two tanks that I think are the exceptions to this rule, Hulk and Penny Parker. Hulk is a character I spent a lot of time thinking about because honestly, he works really well as a dive tank and a brawl tank. Using his jump to displace DPS on high ground and push them away from team fights or winning the 1v1s against them, protecting his team with the bubbles during team fights, using his stun on particularly pestering enemies and dealing respectable melee and clap damage, Hulk honestly is the perfect balance between brawl and dive that he works in both comps and is very flexible. Penny, however, is the opposite of this. I can't quite consider her dive or brawl. She has one movement ability that more so allows her to hold an area better when combined with her Mind Dispenser and manual mind launching, so she can only really be defined by her own class of an area control or setup tank. So, why are these distinctions important to remember? Well, having an understanding of the main playstyle of each tank will allow you to pick your character more according to the choices of your teammates. If you're a solo tank, you're more often than not going to go with Strange, Groot, or Magneto, but sometimes your damage output isn't good enough, so an option like the Thing could be considered. While this leaves you without a shield, coordinating with your strategists and using your damage reduction E-jump can be very effective when helping your teammates play their roles more effectively. The Thing is also a more common solo tank than most other dive or brawl tanks because of his passive ability making him immune to soft CC. For those who don't know, soft CC, or soft crowd control, refers to abilities that displace an enemy, such as Spider-Man's web pull, Invisible Woman's force physics pull or push ability, and most importantly, Wolverine's feral leap. Wolverine is currently the go-to tank buster in Marvel Rivals due to his percent base damage. This means instead of his claws doing a fixed amount of damage like most basic attacks do, his damage is higher the more HP the enemy he is attacking has. So he's very effective at dealing with good tank players, and even if he cannot secure the kill, the strategy of sneaking up behind the tank and kidnapping them by pinning them with the feral leap and taking them to another location can be very effective by removing one of the most important walls the enemy team has, leaving the squishies to defend themselves. Keep in mind the hard CC, referring to stun abilities like Penny Parker's Web Stun, Doctor Strange's Eye of Agamotto ultimate, and the Thing's Clobbering Time ultimate, still affect the Thing, so counterpicking to him is not recommended if these things are the problems you're running into. Finally, a more uncommon but valid solo tank is Venom. He works much more into aggressive comps that move fast with high damage. These require a decent amount of team communication, and I wouldn't recommend it for a beginner tank player, but it's a good thing to keep in mind. So, now that we've explained that, what are some key tips to outline for a tank player? Well, there's plenty of different situations that you'll run into, no matter what role or character you play, but as a tank, I'd recommend you stay calm during team fights. Sometimes it can be easy to get lost when a lot is happening on screen, but here's the thing. Did you get it? It's the Thing. I'm definitely not the 5 millionth person to make this joke. Anyway, you're a big, bulky powerhouse, and you don't need to be afraid when doing your job. Unless the enemy is a Wolverine, then avoid dark alleyways and turn on the lights before you enter a room. He will probably be hiding there. I see him in my nightmares. For real though, a frequent issue I see with new players is panicking when they get into engagements. I can understand when you're being taken by surprise as a DPS or a support, but as a tank, you're more than equipped with the ability to deal with the situation. On that note though, don't stray too far away from your team. It's often easy to get tunnel vision when you're trying to finish off an enemy, but sometimes that leads you to overextend and expose yourself to unnecessary damage that can be capitalized on pretty quickly because of this. So be sure to be aware what your team is, particularly your strategists, and their line of sight to you. A small tip for Doctor Strange players. You can hold Alt with your shield up to turn your camera without turning your shield, which allows you to look behind you and check on your team. This also leads very well into one of the most important jobs of a tank, peeling. Peeling is when you disengage from a frontline fight to go back and protect your supports. In this case, strategists, because a tank without support is going to get riddled with holes faster than you can say legendary. Peeling is always recommended when you're aware of your supports being under attack, frankly, since you'd much rather take the damage yourself than it being dealt to them. Different characters peel in different ways, however. Some are simple, like Cap jumping over enemies towards his supports to then shield them or damage their attackers, or the Thing pressing E to jump to them and give them damage resistance. He can follow this up with a star plus cancel Yancey Street Charge to knock enemies up and remove their movement abilities for a short while. Thor can use his dash to displace enemies and keep them away from his supports, but be aware when you do this, as your supports will then be exposed to the frontline assault you just peeled away from. Alternatively, if you're confident in using your Awakening rune, you can burst down a flanking opponent attacking your support with its high damage potential, scaring them off or securing the kill. Penny is a character who often doesn't need to peel as harshly as the rest of the tank roster because she usually creates a field of protection for her supports, but stacking up the mines in your backline is never a bad idea, and sometimes a well-placed web stun onto a flanker can allow for a big enough burst of damage to immediately kill them, and it has a very short cooldown, so use this often. She can also use her F-web to close the distance between her and her strategist and get in between them and the enemies attacking them, using Penny's natural bulk as its own shield. Magneto obviously has his bubbles, which I would recommend using them altruistically as much as you can. The self-bubble is often only used if you get kidnapped by the angry short Canadian man, or if you're focused down in particular. Magneto's secondary fire ability also has a knockback effect that can be used to push melee characters away from your backline. It can be finicky to hit though, so be sure to be comfortable with it. Doctor Strange often wants to save his levitate ability, and using it to move towards your supports will leave them exposed from all angles. So the only real way to peel is the old-fashioned way, with your legs. You can, however, save Strange's Maelstrom of Madness explosion, which is where the bulk of his damage comes from, and use it when your supports are under fire. This works especially well with the Gamma team from Hulk, since you will not receive the anti-heal effect and it will do more damage. I wouldn't recommend doing this frequently, as being caught with your shield down while anti-healed can be a fight-losing mistake. So try to be accurate with your basic attacks when peeling. Hulk's charge jump allows him to freely disengage from the fight to regroup with his supports at any time, and when going up against particular support-oriented threats like Black Panther or Psylocke, you can use your bubbles as you peel to give them some protection and extra time to heal themselves back up. You can also use your Radioactive Lockdown E ability on enemy frontline characters before disengaging to remove them from the fight for a few precious seconds and buy yourself some time. Due to his lack of mobility, Groot can sometimes struggle to peel, but because of the large amount of cover his wall provides, he often leaves his strategists in safer situations where they have more exit strategies and can keep LOS of you and other offensive characters in teamfights. However, you always have to be aware of the health of these walls and understand when to place them defensively to give your strategists more time to heal themselves and block off flanking DPS characters threatening them. Your smaller offensive walls should be more helpful for this, as they can deal damage to these threats while you yourself do the same. While your large defensive wall can be used in the midst of a team fight, this stops strategists from being exposed from the frontline threats you are turning away from, at least for a second, and gives you the extra health as you're attacking. Venom will often make a lot of distance between him and his supports due to his diving nature and having his own sustainability in his shields. But still, this does not make him exempt from peeling. His web swing is his most commonly used escape tool and works in both long range to reverse dive into his supports and knocking up anyone around them, or short distance where it gives him a quick dash towards them. Since the characters Venom will usually be peeling against are fast moving and slim, it is recommended you try to both attack them with basic attacks and melee. Emma Frost generally peels by projecting her shield back towards her supports to use as cover and play around by running in and out of it. This buys them more time for her to peel, which is generally recommended to be done so in a diamond form, as the dash given by the Chokeslam ability is helpful in closing the distance and CCs the aggressor. This, followed by the kick, can push them further into your backline and leave them vulnerable to be taken out. Moving on, let's talk about team-up abilities. If you aren't aware, each team-up ability involves between 2 and 4 heroes with one anchor. The anchor has a permanent stat boost that is present regardless of the team-up being active or not. They do not receive any new abilities from the team-up being present. In the context of tanks, this includes Thor, Hulk, Groot, and Venom. Groot's team-up is the easiest to understand. It lets Rocket Raccoon or Jeff the Landshark ride on his shoulder. As fun as this can be, it is not recommended. You do not want your healers in the front line like this, and it makes it so you get shredded by characters that deal spread damage like Moon Knight, Squirrel Girl, and Loki. The other 3 team-ups have much more uses. Venom, for example, gives a very short burst of invincibility and damage to Penny Parker and Spider-Man that also has excellent knockback potential. This can be used as a sustain tool to keep yourself alive in dire circumstances and give yourself time to heal, similar to Namor's Water Orb. But it also enables a Spider-Man one-shot combo that can be extremely effective in the right hands. Different variations can deal up to 300 damage, but can be tricky to pull off. Either way, this combo is not to be underestimated in a Venom Spider-Man dive comp, and also leaves Penny Parker to focus on protecting the backline as they provide heals and support, using the ability for knockback or even to push enemy flanking DPS into pre-placed minefields to deal significant damage or take them out. This dive comp works really well when disrupting compositions that don't deal with sudden threats and all-out offense, using Venom and Spider-Man to dive supports and building the rest of the team around supporting or enabling that strategy, such as using Wolverine to kidnap one of the enemy tanks so they have less power when peeling. Dive comps, however, can be countered by more defensive playstyles, such as using Namor or Penny Parker, characters that excel in area control and passive damage against aggressive targets and flankers. Namor in particular is great against sneaky flanking DPS, while Penny is more targeted towards preparing for and countering dive characters with her minefield and short cooldown CC ability. Other CC abilities can be used to disrupt exit strategies from dive characters, such as Luna Snow's Ice Ball or Mantis' Sleep Spore. These are cooldowns to be aware of when running dive strategies. Another dive counter that has recently developed is Adam Warlock, who can trigger his Soul Bond ability when the engagement starts, splitting all damage between his team, and allowing them to output much more burst damage into the diving characters comparatively. This is a very important ability that every dive player who is against Adam Warlock needs to keep in mind. Make sure if you target him to disengage when he triggers it, as there's a hefty cooldown you can wait out before the next engagement. Other characters that excel in close range combat and or peeling could be potential threats, such as Punisher, The Thing, and Wolverine. I do find it a little difficult to pair characters with a dive comp that aren't themselves dive characters, but pairing the Venom team up with a Penny Parker does open the idea of half the team being a protective comp, so something like Penny or Groot and Namor could be very helpful keeping the strategists alive as they heal the divers from afar. Hulk's team-up is similar to Venom's in that it buffs both another Vanguard and a duelist character, these being Doctor Strange and Iron Man. Doctor Strange's Maelstrom of Madness is changed to Gamma Maelstrom, making the range of his E-explosion larger and increasing the damage, but also removing the anti-heal effect that happens when he holds 100 charge for too long. This mildly increases the damage potential of Doctor Strange and also allows him to save his E for better timed burst damage to catch his opponents off guard before their healers save them. Iron Man's Iron Overdrive also becomes Gamma Overdrive, increasing the damage of his basic M1 shots and his M2 Unibeam, going from 50 damage from an Armored Overdrive M1 with a 65 damage explosion field, and a 190 damage per second Unibeam to a more consistent 60 base damage M1 with a 60 damage explosion, and a 220 damage per second Unibeam. Despite the recent buffs to Iron Man's M1 Repulsor Blasts, his Unibeam is still the large bulk of his damage potential, so this team-up is a great improvement to him. Especially since Strange and Hulk work together in an excellent brawl composition, with Strange shielding his team and building up Maelstrom Charge, and Hulk using his radioactive lockdown stun and great damage output from his basic attacks and Thunderclap. A large focus of the enemy damage will be going into these tanks, allowing Iron Man to rain hell from above. Dealing significant damage as long as he's focused. And even if he is, he will always be able to use his boost to escape or regroup with healers. This comp outputs a large amount of damage, but some characters can counter this kind of strategy, such as hitscan DPS characters like Hela, who can consistently headshot Hulk. For those who don't know, hitscan is a term used to describe range characters whose attack have no travel time. Attacks are either projectile or hitscan, and hitscan characters are good against flying characters since they have no travel time to use to avoid their shots. They can target exposed healers when Strange has a shield down and hit Iron Man out of the sky. Punisher is another great example of this, doing consistent hitscan damage against flying enemies, but having the short-range shotgun that is extremely effective against big, unshielded tanks like Hulk and Thing. These aggressive hitscan brawl comps are something to watch out for. Coordinating with your Vanguards and using them to push away the enemy DPS out of position and allow for greater use of Iron Man's abilities, Hulk can use his Shift Bubble ability to give him and Doctor Strange extra sustain as they engage, but be prepared to levitate and jump out if things get dicey. On the other hand, you could use your second DPS slot for a character to challenge these DPS players from close or afar, and make sure they can't put their crosshairs on that Iron Man without risking their own life. Some examples include your own Hela, Winter Soldier, and Psylocke. Thor's team-up also gives new abilities to a fellow Vanguard and a duelist, these being Captain America and Storm. Captain America often struggles with damage output, and when paired with Thor he gains the Charged Aegis ability, which changes his basic attack to a ranged shield throw that happens repeatedly and can hit several enemies close together, as well as doing 5 more damage than the basic Sentinel Strike shield throw that activates after 2 basic punches. This gives Cap a ranged threat and also makes him do more consistent damage to take fights in the enemy backline and get the job done before the tanks can peel. Storm receives the Charge Gale ability, which is used offensively to cast Chain Lightning that deals 55 damage, bouncing up to 3 times, combined with a solid M1 damage and 70 damage coming from M2, all of which can be buffed by her own Lightning Aura. She can use the team-up ability as an excellent finisher ability that hits multiple targets. You may think that Cap and Thor don't work very well together, since they have different playstyles. As I said previously, Thor is a brawl tank and Cap is a dive tank. But that's the beauty of this team-up. Cap engages the backline and starts fighting the supports, dealing damage, pushing them back and making as much space as possible, often having to fight both supports and 1 DPS, while Thor pushes the frontline and pressures with his great damage that can't be shielded and displacing enemies, pushing them back with his dash. This creates a perfect dichotomy of attack that focuses both integral halves of the enemy team, and can be combined with 1 DPS to assist each tank. Storm can use her speed boost to reach the objective quickly and engage the enemy faster than usual, giving her team an advantage since there's less time for the opponents to deal damage as your 2 melee tanks are approaching before they can begin to do damage. Then her damage boost will add up if everyone on the team is doing damage. Even strategists like Luna Snow and Cloak and Dagger can do partial damage when focusing on heals. Storm also helps to focus down the ranged threats that Captain America and Thor would have to rush or dive. and Cap can harass the hitscan characters that would usually be a threat to Storm, using his shield and mobility to keep himself alive and continue to be a menace. In my opinion, this comps brings out the best of both Thor and Captain America, and can work well with the last DPS slot being used for a character who can assist Thor in the brawl, such as Hela, who also has a team up with Thor we will mention shortly, Mr. Fantastic for shield support and extra sustain, or the standard characters for damage like Winter Soldier and Namor. This composition can be countered by defensive teams that are confident with their frontline defenses while also being apt at protecting their backline. This is often seen in triple support teams using 2 main healers and another support with more defensive cooldowns that can also deal good damage, such as Adam Warlock or Loki. Adam Warlock in this case is also extremely effective at challenging Storm with his hitscan basic attack, especially since his soul bond is effective against Captain America's harassment and often forces him to disengage temporarily. Thor can also sometimes struggle to be the sole focus of a frontline brawl because his stance and movement make his head very exposed, and an accurate Hela, Winter Soldier, Punisher, Adam Warlock, or any other high damage character really with headshot capabilities can take advantage of this and shred his health bar. Keep this in mind when playing Thor, and try to practice evasive movement techniques when you're in the sightline of these threatening targets. However, as said before, Captain America is very helpful at distracting these characters. As of Season 2, 2 teams were added that have Vanguard anchors, and 1 was altered. This alteration was replacing Doctor Strange in the Gamma team-up with Hulk, Strange, and Iron Man, with Namor. This gives Namor a gamma-powered squid that shoots a beam of gamma radiation towards a target. This can be used to protect the support players from flanking enemies while Hulk is diving or brawling, and Iron Man is doing what he does best from above, or to protect the Iron Man against other flying enemies that wish to duel him in the skies. Since Hulk isn't a great solo tank, however, this unit doesn't have its own pre-built-in comp like it used to with Strange, but it does open up the idea of more variations. Perhaps with Strange again, or Magneto, or Emma Frost, Hulk is so versatile that he works with any other tank. And Namor is just an incredibly good DPS character no matter who is being played. He can always make it work with Iron Man and Hulk. This time around, Cap is an anchor in one of his team-ups, even if we had to lose my favourite team-up to get such a chance. RIP to a real one. But I find this one just as, if not even more fun. Naturally, Cap has a new ability in tandem with Bucky. He can dash towards him and ready his shield for Bucky to punch it and create a shockwave of damage. But not only that, it also gives Bucky the ability to jump to his teammates and slam the ground. Best of all, both abilities reload Bucky's gun, meaning he has much more to do before reloading now. This creates such a fun and fresh composition of a dive character and range threat playing into each other, planning their sandwich of attacks, and it can go so many ways. If Bucky needs help finishing whoever's on the front line, Cap can turn around and bash his shield on Bucky's metal fist. Or if Cap needs a hand with the backline, Bucky can dash in and slam the ground ready to start blasting. This works extremely well in a dive composition, but also with a main tank working with Bucky to keep him afloat. Magneto, for example, can bubble Cap as he dives in and shield any oncoming damage aimed at Bucky. Or Groot can wall off any poor tanks that get hit with the Scorpion "Get over here" by Bucky. Emma Frost also works extremely well by playing passively, building up her charge until the enemy starts to ignore her and focus on Steve, which lets her damage rack up, or go forward for Bucky and the rest of the team, where she can start brawling herself, or more importantly, chokeslam and kick the enemy into her backline, where Bucky and the other DPS can finish them off. Wolverine also works extremely well into this by putting a lot of pressure on the frontline tanks and opening up opportunities for Bucky to pick off the squishies that were relying on their protection. Finally, the most interesting team-up added in Season 2 of Marvel Rivals. Emma Frost brings Mental Projection, which gives Magneto and Psylocke the ability to create a clone of themselves for a short amount of time. This clone will copy whatever action you take, moving, attacking, with a lower amount of damage of course, using abilities including Magneto's shield and bubble and Psylocke's dash, but not ulting. When you are ulting as either character, AI takes over the clone and starts to attack. This can be used in several different ways, such as Psylocke increasing her damage output into the enemy backline to wipe them even before their tanks can peel, or instead as a method of confusion of more aware strategists, like a particularly accurate Adam Warlock who you have lost a fight to before. Making him choose between 2 targets means you have a higher chance of winning the battle. Magneto benefits from this even more, however. The fact that he can bubble 2 teammates at once and have 2 shields up during, say, a particularly offensive ult like an enemy Magneto or Hela, means that his protection output is massively increased, and an accurate Magneto player can use the extra damage to delete squishy characters with simple basic attack and secondary attack combos. Emma Frost is of course very popular right now, so it's not hard to get value from this team up. But hair protection combined with Magneto's gives the team a lot of sustainability, and works in pretty much the ideal poke composition, since Magneto's projectiles are based around exploding at a range that can hit several enemies, and Emma Frost needs to use her shield and range to build charge and start dealing out realistic damage. But Emma Frost's diamond form means she cannot use her shield, so Magneto can coordinate and start to double bubble and double shield his teammates, or increase his own poke damage while Emma Frost is busy doing hot girl stuff, like choke slamming men. This brings us to the rest of the team-ups the Vanguards have. These include a non-tank character as the anchor, and buff the tank in some way. These include Invisible Woman and the Thing, Hela and Thor, Scarlet Witch and Magneto, and Wolverine, Hulk and the Thing. The simplest team-up out of these is Wolverine, Hulk and Thing's Fastball Special. This allows Hulk or the Thing to pick up Wolverine and throw him like a very angry adamantium missile. While this is incredibly fun and hilarious to pull off sometimes, it's not supremely impactful and I don't have much to say about it. On the contrary, the rest of these team-ups are quite significant, starting with Scarlet Witch and Magneto's Metallic Fusion. This gives Magneto a Chaos Magic infused sword attack he can activate for 10 seconds, does 3 bursts of sword slashes, creating a 60 damage projectile, and 35 damage spell field that can hit multiple enemies. This gives Magneto a great option for dealing with crowds and multiple enemies in front of him, and increases his damage output considerably. What is usually cited as the main problem of this team-up is that it requires Scarlet Witch on your team to pull off, when she is widely regarded as a bottom-tier character who isn't worth bringing compared to other DPS, due to her burst damage being restricted to a cooldown, her underwhelming ultimate compared to other higher-tier DPS, even after the buffs, and lower damage output. In fact, I have seen some comp players choose to have a teammate start the game as Scarlet Witch and wait and spawn. Then, as the rest of the team engage the first team fight, Magneto will activate the team up, and Scarlet Witch will switch to another character and try to catch up. For these reasons, I don't recommend coordinating your team composition around this strategy, but there are some interplay between the two characters, such as Magneto being able to bubble and ulting Scarlet Witch so she doesn't die while it activates. A much more commonly used team-up is that of Invisible Woman and the Thing's cooperative comrades. This gives the Thing an ability that immediately gives him 100 extra max HP and for 5 seconds continuously generates 50 bonus HP per second. This can be a very clutch way of keeping yourself alive during a team fight if your supports are preoccupied or you just need that extra boost in a 1v1. Because Invisible Woman is a top tier support character right now, this team up is very common when playing the Thing. Since support ability, however, you can't really build your team comp around this, but it is one of the most flexible tank abilities and will work in a variety of compositions with the Thing. This ability does also give the same effect to Mr. Fantastic and Human Torch, so running that with a flying/brawl comp could get the maximum usage. Finally, we have Hela and Thor's Odinson Reborn ability, which allows Hela, upon a finishing blow, to revive Thor or Loki at 80% HP if they are in the respawn phase, or give them 50 bonus HP if they are alive. This can essentially turn a teamfight into a 7v6 if used correctly, and with Hela being in contention for the best DPS in the game, if Thor is present, there's a high chance she will be too. Unless she's banned, of course. Because this ability is spread across a duelist, a vanguard, and a strategist, it allows for a lot more flexibility, such as use with a main tank like Strange, a dive tank like Cap to get the Cap Thor team up, or go fully brawl with the Thing and Invisible Woman. Moving on to tank-specific tips. As Doctor Strange, melee after your basic attacks to reload cancel and increase your damage output. Strange's melee attack can also hit multiple targets, which can be very helpful combined with his ultimate, since both the body and the soul of the enemy have a hitbox. Your melee attack and Maelstrom of Madness can hit both. If you're down to the wire and need to get to point fast, you can always switch to Doctor Strange and portal to point last second. This portal can also be used as a wall to block 2 doorways in enemy spawn, which is great on maps like Idris or Path, Last Point, with only 2 spawn doorways. Momentum also carries through Strange's portal, so you can levitate, place a portal below you and fall through it, shooting yourself out and allowing you to ult and catch the enemies by surprise. Your shield is a great thing to be able to use as cover, but don't use it all the time. You should be using the natural cover of the map, which works great for the intervals between your M1 attacks. Use your shield when you need to back up, protect a teammate, or are displaced. Build your Maelstrom of Madness before contesting high ground. As tempting as it is to immediately flush out an enemy from high ground, first brawl or poke to get your charge up and then levitate towards them and do 1 or 2 basic attacks, a melee, and explode. This makes sure they run back to their team or get picked off. For Magneto, always save your bubbles for your supports when they're under fire, or for flank and dive DPS characters. A very common strategy is for Star-Lord to jump in and use his E attack while bubbled, so he gets a lot of ult charge. Self-bubbling should only be used when completely necessary, like being faced with a strong ult or being kidnapped by a wolverine. Or just when you're being bested down and about to die. Remember that your shield has a really short duration, so avoid panic using it and use it as a last second tool to back away. A quick protection to help an ulting DPS behind you, like Punisher or Star-Lord, or a parry that stops a burst like an enemy Magneto last second. Speaking of, Magneto's ult is the most complicated part of his kit. It might seem hard to get significant picks with it, so let's explain how the damage calculation works. Magneto's ult starts at base 100 damage, and increases to 300 when fully charged at the end of the 4-second max duration. It can gain an extra 300 damage by receiving 100 charges worth of damage, which is the bar in the middle of your screen, which means you can do at most 600 damage. This is very unlikely to happen, however, because the charge bar going over 100 will cause it to explode. So you often want to hold your attack for the maximum duration to prevent the enemy projectiles from hitting your team for the longest time. Even if no shots are being fired, you are still charging the damage of your ult. And then chuck it at any support character you see. This works very well through Cloak and Dagger or Invisible Woman ult. However, be aware that Luna Snow has 275 HP, and when she ults she gains 250 shield at the beginning. So if you want to kill her through that, you would at least need to charge it for the maximum duration and have at least 67 charge. So this is not recommended. Instead, wait for her shields to drop or aim at someone else with a smaller amount of health. Your right-click attack is also very powerful, and you shouldn't be afraid to use this often. Even if it only has two bars, the knockback can also be very helpful keeping melee characters off of you or your teammates. As Venom, go to your character settings and turn off Easy Swing. This will make mobility much better in the long run. As tempting as it is to use your swing into your slam to engage, try to avoid doing this, as it leaves you with a movement option to escape if you get overwhelmed by damage. You can instead engage by using your wall climb to get to a high place, jumping off and slamming, or swinging to high ground and waiting for the cooldown to then dive and engage. Oftentimes as Venom on defense, you can set up at a high point and wait for the enemy team to leave spawn, then target the last person to leave as they will most likely be someone without a movement ability, like Adam Warlock. This will either end with you getting a kill or force the team to turn around and help their teammate, giving you ample time to leave. And speaking of leaving, this is the most important thing you should know for dive tanks: when to leave. As Venom, you should do so after using your shields, unless you know that you can confirm a kill before having to exit. Make sure you have a plan to get out and grab a health pack or regroup with your team for healing. Don't be afraid to melee on Venom too. You can often mix 1 or 2 melee attacks in after a basic attack to get similar or more damage output that can be used in a quick burst if you need to take someone out. Especially since aiming with Venom can be a little weird sometimes. As Groot, you want to use your small Thorn Lash walls in instantly offensive ways that can later be used as cover. This can be achieved by placing them in locations during teamfights, where the enemy has to choose between damaging you or breaking your walls, either netting you extra damage or buying you more time before they attack you. This also leaves them as defense options, because you or your teammates can still use them as cover. Your big Ironwood wall should be saved for either zoning out a single overextending enemy to block off their heals and make them a much more vulnerable target, or if you need immediate cover to save your team from a dangerous ult or to buy time for a reset to heal. Don't be afraid to use your Spore Bomb often, as it's a very powerful way to get ult charge. It can often be a good idea to hit the enemy spawn with it at the start of the round, and to wait until it's off cooldown to use right after ulting where it hits everyone. You can also place Groot Walls to destroy enemy objects like Penny Parker's Bloons 2d6 Spike Factory or Moon Knight's Onks, as Groot somehow does not one-shot these Onks. For Thor, your main initiate tool for a fight is to start with your Storm Surge dash into Lightning Realm to deal damage over time and generate more Thor Force. Then use a 3-hit combo into an instant Storm Surge dash, using your M2 Mjolnir throw only to hit enemies at range when approaching or as a finishing tool. This does 70 damage if it hits and 30 if it hits when coming back, which can be huge. Your Awakening Rune is your most powerful ability, but also makes you the most vulnerable. It can be blocked by shields and you cannot use any other abilities while it is active. Try to save this for ranged pokes where your other abilities are too close range to do anything, or to 1v1 close range squishies that you can melt with absurd damage output. Or even learning to use it to threaten the pesky flying characters, as long as they're the only target. Otherwise you should probably ignore them. Use your dash to contest high ground and push opponent DPS off of it, or threaten to 1v1 them. Don't use your ult at the beginning of a team fight when everyone will most likely be healed. Wait until you can see 1 or 2 squishies that have already taken damage, and dash toward them and use it. Even if you get no kills, you force them to scatter and can often use your dash afterwards to start a 1v1 in which you have the advantage. Thor is immune to CC while ulting now, so don't worry about that. Always be ready to peel. Thor is probably the second best character appealing, and the only reason he isn't number 1 is the other tank can peel from a further distance. But Thor can both peel and displace enemies going for his backline, allowing you to pick up some damage immediately, and you can finish them off with either a Mjolnir throw or Awakening Rune if you get your Thor Force back, should they start running away. Penny is a very low mobility character, so any boost to your movement can help massively. Remember that you can climb walls vertically like Hanzo or Genji from Overwatch. This can be used to contest pesky high ground players, since they often won't be diving and you can't impact them with your nest or mines. While standing on your web, you move 25% faster and heal 25 HP per second, gaining max 150 points of overhealth. This is why you should always try to engage while inside of your webs. Use your M2 web stun as much as possible because it's debatably the strongest part of your kit, and it's on a very short cooldown. Don't leave your nest in the same place for too long. It goes on a much shorter cooldown when you cancel it as opposed to it being destroyed. Mix it up and make it so your opponents need to focus on both you and finding it. Your Cyber Bond F ability is used for movement to get to a location first and set up, or to escape a bad situation. It doesn't work very well as an engage tool. Don't be afraid to spam your mines at enemies, especially when there are webs on the ground nearby, which your F and Web Snare M2 abilities can place to cover these mines. Only 15 mines can be placed at a time though, which rarely happens, but it's good to keep in mind. Focus your mines on squishies because it's very rare that you'll be able to kill a tank with them. There are plenty of flank and dive characters you can counter, but in the event of none of these being present, you need to get more creative. Play aggressive and place your nest behind the cover of any choke point you can and defend it. You can try to place the webs below your enemies so the mines you shoot at them don't get broken before they try to detonate. Be careful when doing this, because using the web with F can slingshot you into the enemies. Only try this when you're close enough for it not to trigger. When setting up, also make sure to chain your webs together instead of just placing them randomly, since touching any part of a connected web will trigger the mines to chase the enemy on the web, even if the mines are placed on the other side of the web. As Emma Frost, don't just project your shield in the open and allow the enemies to burst it down. Use it when you've reached a choke you want to hold, such as a corner that is especially good for poking, or to protect a teammate that is a distance away from you. Your basic attack is really easy to build charge off of bulky tanks, like Venom and the Thing. Keep this in mind when peeling, as it can help you do a lot more damage. Your charge does dissipate very quickly though, so keep this in mind if you're keeping too far away to get consistent damage. Your diamond form is very fun and very powerful, but must be used tactically. You can chokeslam any enemy in the game, but it is easiest to hit tanks. I like to use it to stop incoming brawl threats or when I am peeling and want to hit a dive character, like Venom or Captain America. It can be harder to hit someone like Spider-Man or Black Panther, but you can always just try to out-damage them. If you end up in a 1v1, Diamond Form is your best option. Using the Psionic Crystal ability, then switching to Diamond Form and hitting both the crystal and the enemy with a basic attack and kicking them into a wall will deal upwards of 275 damage and instantly defeat any squishy enemy. This can be hard to pull off because of the aim of the crystal, however, so be sure to practice this. The crystal is one of the most powerful parts of your kit. Make sure you're always trying to use it and aim center mass when doing so, as you definitely want to hit it. Then be sure to attack the crystal whenever possible, as the burst damage from it is very helpful in the war of attrition. When faced with the mirror, always try to destroy the enemy Emma Frost's shield before placing yours. This will allow you to build your charge much faster and increase your damage output on them. If they come in swinging, however, chokeslam that faker and kick her into your backline. Then help them take her out before re-engaging. Your ultimate can also be used in a variety of different ways. It's very unlikely that you'll be able to pull enemies off the map with it often, but you can remove key threats from high ground, coordinate with your team to remove support ults that would deny your teammates offensive ults, or use it during certain area-based ults, like Moon Knight or Psylocke to prevent the enemies from escaping, or Invisible Woman to force them out of the circle of healing. The damage also racks up very quickly, so comboing it with any other high damage ult like Punisher or Star-Lord can be a very great effect. And it doesn't even need to be oriented with an enemy or ally ultimate. You can use it to get important DPS away from your teammates, or have the enemy be forced to face you, exposing their backs to your entire team. Honestly, Emma is such a versatile character that she works with so many different strategies. Don't be afraid to get creative, embody her boss bitch attitude, and you'll be improving in no time. As Hulk, your jump is an incredible tool. Always have that thing charged. Whether you're diving backline, knocking flyers out of the sky, repositioning or regrouping, you can always charge it with no repercussions. Especially charge it while in Monster Hulk. It's the best mobility tool you have. Your monster form can seem underwhelming at first, especially if you try to use World Breaker. A good combo is to jump in, ult, then M1 and M2 and repeat. The M2 Gamma Burst does 125 damage to be exact, and ignoring it makes Monster Hulk a lot worse. While Worldbreaker deals underwhelming damage, it can be a good stall tool. If you want to extend your monster hook form as long as possible, you can use it for 11 seconds and use Worldbreaker at the very end. During Worldbreaker, you gain 30% damage reduction, so you can usually grab an enemy support and keep them preoccupied until your animation ends or they shoot you out of it. If you ever get knocked into banner, immediately throw your grenade at your feet to boop yourself away. Hitting yourself with the grenade gets you 10% ult charge, and each other person you hit also gets you 10% ult charge. From there, try to regroup first, especially if you have a shield tank. Since Hulk has the team up with Doctor Strange, this comp will be ran regularly, and you should be able to be protected by his shield while you regain your Hulk form. Use your radioactive lockdown on enemies running away from you, usually supports, to give you time to charge a jump to close the distance or to regain your M2 cooldown for range damage. Hulk's bubbles have 250 HP and give you ult charge when shot, so use these during team engagements. You can also use them while jumping, as well as use your other abilities and attack, so be sure to attack while jumping, especially when diving a flying enemy, as knocking into them will take them out of the sky and you can deal extra damage while falling. If ever in a 1v2 versus support and a squishy, use your radioactive lockdown on the support and attack the squishy. You should be able to kill them before the support regains control, as long as you use your M2 Gamma Burst wisely. Be aware of the characters that can stun you or stop your movement abilities, because this cancels your jump charge. These include characters like The Thing, Mantis, and Luna Snow. Try not to dive alone and always bring another tank or DPS with you. This usually pairs very well with your bubble, as you can bubble your fellow diver while jumping in if you stay close to them. As The Thing, go into your settings and turn on Toggle Dash. This makes your Yancey Street Charge much easier to control, and you have complete freedom of when to end it. Often you want to use it for a short amount of time, then stop it to slam the ground and knock enemies up. When faced with multiple enemies, always spam your M2 Haymaker. It has a huge hitbox and deceptive range. Technically, your M1 attacks have the fastest time to kill in your kit, but that's if you land every hit, which isn't feasible most of the time. Your Haymaker is how you make up for that. Yancey Street Charge can also cancel some ults like Magneto, so be sure to use that in those scenarios. While you cannot be displaced, you can still be stunned, including by displacement moves like Winter Soldier's Grapple, so be careful of using an ability or ulting when in front of such things. Your M2 and Charge both give you extra shields, so you can use them for extra survivability and tankiness. Yancey Street Charge even makes you immune to CC, meaning you can use it during a Doctor Strange ult or a Thing ult. Your E and Battle Leap ability makes you the best tank in the game at peeling, giving damage reduction to supports and duelists under fire. The ease of use and range of this, and the huge damage distance of it, makes Thing by far the best at this, especially since his body can soak up damage intended to hit your supports. It can also be used for jumping into the fray to help your frontlining or diving tank, and assisting them in doing damage or giving them the survivability to get out. This can often be paired with the Yancey Street Charge to displace enemies, making it harder for them to hit your fleeing second tank and other dive characters. The Clobbering Time ultimate can hit through Stranger's shield, but not Magneto's bubble and not a Groot wall. Be sure to track these abilities if you plan on using it. It can also, fun fact, hit through the payload. It can go up and down stairs, but not over a ledge, so be wary when using it on high ground. Since the Thing is immune to soft CC, he can block doorways and small hallways and be unable to be moved by displacement abilities. This can be especially effective when body blocking enemies from pushing point, or if a Penny Parker or Hulk are ulting and trying to get past you. While Wolverine can't kidnap you, I wouldn't recommend trying to challenge him to a 1v1. You have superior range with your Haymaker, so use that at a distance to get some damage on him before he can damage you. Overall, avoid face tanking with the Thing. As bulky as he is, he has nothing to defend himself against the damage and can't reliably take it all on his own. Instead, use cover to your advantage and play corners. Peeking around to M2 is not only a great way to get ult charge, but it does significant damage, especially if the enemy supports don't immediately focus on healing each other. Okay, we have one more tank left, but before we end, I just want to say if you found this content informative, helpful, or just enjoyed watching it, please subscribe. But I greatly appreciate you watching anyway. Finally, we have Captain America, my favorite tank, who I have the most time on. First, turn on toggle sprint in settings. This is much more comfortable to play with and also allows you to take advantage of sprint animation cancels by tapping shift after every hit to attack much faster and increase your damage output. Your power jump makes you much harder to hit, and you should use it often. It can help you gain high ground early and give you more options for diving their backline, such as on Byrne and T'Challa's Imperial Institute of Science, where you can use the platforms over the objective to jump over the wall that covers the main doorway the enemies walk through. Diving from here will distract the supports or perhaps the entire team if they peel. Enough for your team to claim the point and start attacking their backs. Your shield is a perfect tool in this kind of engagement. Not only can you reflect CC with it, namely Luna Snow's Ice Ball and Mantis' Spore Grenade should she throw it directly at you rather than at the ground. It also helps you with that extra survivability to get away and book it for the nearest health pack. Your shield throw is the bulk of your damage without the Thor team up. Always hit the ground with it instead of trying to directly hit an enemy. And you can use it to poke from afar and gain ult charge. And to hit multiple supports as you dive, so they have to choose between healing each other or attacking you immediately. If you have to deal with a flying enemy, jump at them and aim to hit them twice with your basic attack. Then your Sentinel Strike will be activated, and you can hit them with your 4 shield throw basic attacks. This will do most of their health bar, and should force them to retreat or have them picked off. You're immune to CC during your F shield bash, so you can time this effectively to avoid ults like Doctor Strange or The Thing. You can also reflect projectile ultimates like Hela, Magneto, or Iron Man. This is very difficult to achieve, but even if you do not hit anyone, taking no damage from them is a huge bonus. Doctor Strange's ult will not go through your shield, so you can protect yourself from it and then run to a teammate he is trying to attack and stand in between them to protect them as well. Make sure to track key cooldowns when diving. One of the most important can be Adam Warlock's Soul Bond. Diving him and having it activate negates a lot of your damage output, so try to find an escape and later re-engage. If played correctly, you can be the absolute best character for dealing with Punisher, Turret, and his and Star-Lord's ultimates. For Punisher, if possible, dive him from behind to do some damage first and until he turns around. If not, try to jump your way toward him and land in front, then block and reflect his rounds, since they are explosive. The accuracy of your reflect doesn't matter. This will do a huge chunk of his health, and you can often jump afterwards to get out his line of sight, throw your shield, and if off cooldown, slam, and only 1 or 2 more hits will knock him out of it. When he ults, you can start damaging him during the voice line, but pull your shield up when he says the X in Executioner. Then the rockets he automatically fires will be directed at you and redirected back. This should shred his health bar. And even if he's being healed through, any damage you take is damage your supports and DPS did not take, and they have much less health than you. For Star-Lord, you can usually block 2 full magazines of him firing in his ult by forcing him to aim at you by standing near your teammates using your shield. Then you can take one from your normal health bar, and should have your shield back up by the time he starts the last magazine. Jeff and Rocket can be difficult supports to kill, as they have very good mobility to avoid being dove. But often forcing them to run away is good enough. Just pick another target afterwards and jump towards them. Your ultimate gives you and anyone who walks in the path you create extra shields and generates more shields over time, as well as making your bash and jump knock up enemies. This can either be used defensively to help you keep your team alive during any team fight by matching another supporter like Mantis, Cloak and Dagger, or Luna, or used offensively to keep yourself alive while pushing back the enemy backline. This can be very helpful if you're keeping them away from your teammates pushing the objective. Since your team can deal with them, and even if you die, they would end up with the numbers advantage. Despite this though, I would recommend trying to stay alive at all costs. The main advantage of playing Cap is having your own survivability, disruption, and easy ways to get in and out. Use these to your advantage at all times to keep your usefulness uptime maxed. If you're trying to hit an enemy through a shield, use Quick Melee. This will not trigger Sentinel Strike and you will continue to hit through the shield. Use Cap can contest high ground at any time because he has no problem getting there. He's also an excellent character for peeling, as he can jump around wherever he wants. As long as you make sure your dives are happening alongside team pushes, you'll be disrupting flanking DPS, people taking high ground, and support mains just trying to exist, giving your team so many windows to start blasting. Finally, I wanted to dedicate one more segment to just go over all the Vanguard related changes that happened in the Season 2 patch of Marvel Rivals, as most of this video was made before that reveal. Starting with the team-ups. We unfortunately lost both the Metallic Chaos and Voltaic Union team-ups with Scarlet Witch and Magneto and Thor, Cap and Storm, and they only cried for 20 minutes. Since Thor was the anchor, this did remove his anchor buff of 100 extra max HP, but he was buffed to compensate for this, giving him 75 extra max HP and increasing his movement speed to 6.5 meters per second. These are welcome changes that make playing Thor feel slightly smoother than before. I've been having a ton of fun with him, even without the team-up. Despite Cap losing his greatest damage output, he did gain a new team-up with Bucky in Stars Aligned, which gave him a 100 HP buff and a 5% damage increase, both of which are very great additions that make me excited to show off my Lord Cap skills. Despite this, however, he did have 25 HP removed and 50 HP removed from his shield, so his survivability is a net gain, but still not a full buff. Namor replaced Strange in the Gamma Charge team-up, which doesn't really matter as Namor is a permaban for me. Frick that guy. But Strange no longer having the Gamma buff is sad, especially when his basic attack's damage is reduced due to having his projectiles reduced from 18 to 16, and his Maelstrom of Madness's damage is being reduced from 1.3 per charge to 1.2, Due to his new team-up with Scarlet Witch, however, Stephen Strange at least has an extra 100 HP to enjoy now. If only he could do something with it. Magneto left his team-up with Scarlet Witch for a new team-up with Emma Frost, however, which is just so much fun. And Hulk must be a developer favourite, because he received not 1, not 2, but 3 buffs. He moves at 6.5 meters per second now, same as Thor, which is faster than before. His power jump charges faster, and the cooldowns of his bubbles were reduced from 12 seconds to 10 seconds. This is very welcome and makes Hulk feel a lot better to play already. Penny Parker can get headshot damage with her basic attack now, which was honestly very needed. She felt quite underwhelming for a while. She also has 20% less of a movement speed reduction when firing, both of which definitely make her more fun and impactful. But I don't know how impactful yet. That's something we'll figure out later. The Thing has, unfortunately, had his Embattle Leap E ability nerfed from giving 30% damage reduction to 25%. This isn't huge, but I felt very sad seeing him get nerfed, no matter how minor. Magneto got a small nerf too, making his ultimate take about 10% longer to get. I believe this was valid because I have been a menace with this ult recently. J. Jonah Jameson would not approve. Although, I wouldn't mind if he wanted to get some pictures of me. Anyway, I'm very happy with all of these changes, even if some saddened me at first. I believe they are all valid, and I am very excited for the future of these patches. The fact that one update made me have to add so many more sections in this video really shows how much work the devs have been putting in, and I appreciate that. And that's everything. There are all my thoughts, my tips and tricks, my recommendations on how to play Vanguard effectively in Marvel Rivals. This is by far my biggest video yet, and the most effort I've put into a project. I hope you learned something from this, or at least have a new way to play a character you're interested in. If you liked the video, I'd really appreciate hitting like and subscribe. I know every YouTuber says it, but I'm hoping to grow my extremely small channel to make some content that I love. And who knows, maybe I'll end up following this up with a strategist or duelist guide. Let me know in the comments if you're interested. With that, I thank you for watching. I do genuinely, really appreciate it. And I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.